Hey there, survivors. Thanks for tuning into this story. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. It really helps me keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now let's get started. My name isn't important. It used to be printed on a small metal plate outside an office door, under the emblem of a covert division people pretended didn't exist. Back then, my work was sealed behind layers of security and red tape. Now, everything is out in the open, if you can call scorched rubble open. Truth is, there's not much left to hide or reveal. Yet, here I am, sharing my story. I never intended to become one of the catalysts for the end of the world. That thought alone keeps me awake at night, in what used to be a quiet bunker beneath a government complex. I just wanted to serve my country, though I can't figure out where patriotism ended and ignorance began. And I can't shake the feeling that I was an unwitting piece of a bigger plan, a plan that led us straight into the apocalypse. I was recruited from a top-tier university program specializing in security systems. Some well-dressed officials approached me about an opportunity that would put my skills to use for the greater good. It didn't take long for me to accept. I was ambitious and naive, and they offered me a chance to do something important. The place they took me to wasn't on any map. Not a single sign identified it from the outside, just a bland, windowless structure in the middle of a restricted zone. When we went inside, I saw rows of monitors, heavily encrypted computer terminals, and corridors that only opened to coded keycards. The environment was intense, but it thrilled me. My first months were spent learning how to navigate the labyrinth of overlapping security protocols. From deciphering cryptic directives to scanning the countless cameras for signs of infiltration, I had no time to question our end goals. The chain of command above me was all need to know, so I didn't poke around. Soon I was recognized for my knack at troubleshooting system loops, and my superiors quietly upgraded my clearance. That upgrade was the beginning of my fall. I still remember the day I first heard the term nuclear vault. My immediate supervisor, a soft-spoken individual with a severe, almost unblinking gaze, handed me an encrypted file. The label simply read, "Top Secret, Vault Access Protocols." At first, I thought it might be an old system, a relic from the Cold War era. But as I delved into the protocols, it became clear this was something more contemporary. My mind struggled to reconcile the official directive. I was to modernize and streamline the authentication process for a set of vaults containing high-priority items. The language was ambiguous. I wasn't told explicitly that these vaults held nuclear warheads, but I quickly pieced it together. Certain codes matched known government references to ballistic programs, the type you only see in internal documents. Conflicting emotions wrestled within me. On one hand, the magnitude of the responsibility was huge. On the other hand, there was a creeping unease. Why were we updating nuclear vault systems now? Were we on the brink of something big? I was not high enough in the hierarchy to question orders, but behind the scenes, rumors circulated among the analysts. Whispers about increased military posturing around the globe, rumors of geopolitical tensions nearing a breaking point. Some said the vaults housed more than standard ballistic devices, that new developments in advanced weaponry were also locked away. I kept my head low, focusing on the lines of code and the cryptography entrusted to me. But late at night, alone in my office, I'd read between those lines, scanning each directive carefully. My heart pounded each time I considered the potential outcome if those codes were ever activated. After months of labor, I had completed the modernization project. A new interface integrated biometric scans, rotating passcodes, and manual override sequences. The system was a fortress, designed to be impenetrable, except by those with the highest clearance. Part of my job included testing the final keys, physical components that could trigger the system if combined with the correct digital codes. I remember staring at those small metallic objects that morning, feeling like I was staring at something far more dangerous than they appeared. They looked ordinary, a pair of odd-shaped keys with slots for fingerprint verification. They gleamed under the fluorescent lights, waiting to be inserted into a console that only existed in the heart of the facility. The final inspection was scheduled for a Friday afternoon. The lead engineer, a stoic figure I had barely seen outside of briefing rooms, calmly handed me both keys and instructed me to perform the test sequence in a secure lab. It was the first time I was physically touching them. Despite my gloved hands, I felt an electric jolt of anxiety. For the test, I was to confirm that the hardware recognized the key's identifiers and that the digital protocols responded with an all green. The lab was sealed from the outside. 2 armed guards stood watch, ensuring the chain of custody was followed to the letter. It was supposed to be routine, but something within me screamed, "This is a mistake." I brushed it aside, telling myself I was just nervous because the stakes were high. The entire process took no more than 30 minutes. Everything checked out perfectly, and the system displayed a success message. I felt a surge of conflicting emotions, pride in my work, dread for what that work could unleash. At the end of the test, I was told to secure the keys in a reinforced case, but that's not how events played out. The lead engineer left abruptly, called away by urgent new orders. One guard disappeared to verify some anomaly in the hallway. For a few minutes, I was left alone with the keys. That's when I did something I can't fully explain even now. I pocketed one of them. Why did I do it? Perhaps it was fear. Perhaps it was an unspoken sense of responsibility. On the outside, it looked like plain theft. But in my mind, it felt more like a desperate measure. With that key under my control, I thought I might prevent the worst from happening, if only by adding a layer of unpredictability. The moment I slipped the key into my pocket, I felt like I'd signed a contract with fate. My pulse throbbed in my ears. Somehow, nobody noticed. When the lead engineer returned with the guard, I acted calm and handed over only the second key. I was never questioned. There was no mention of a missing item, no alarm. It was as though everything was proceeding normally. That evening, I left the facility. My heart raced for hours, imagining all the ways I could be caught. But no one followed. No black cars tailed me. No mysterious messages arrived. It was eerie, like the calm before a storm. Days turned into weeks. Tension rose globally. News bulletins flashed urgent updates about mounting international hostility. There were rumors of advanced weapons testing, undisclosed negotiations failing. I even overheard some of my superiors mention code red in hushed tones. And there I was, with a key in my apartment, hidden in an old metal lockbox. Every time I looked at it, the same chill ran down my spine. If I returned it, I'd incriminate myself. If I destroyed it, they'd suspect sabotage. So I kept it, telling myself I'd know what to do if the time ever came. Soon that time did come. It happened on a crisp morning. The sky was so blue it was almost surreal. I was on my way to the facility, driving along an empty stretch of highway. The radio cut to an emergency broadcast. A strained voice told everyone to seek immediate shelter. Words like nuclear war and international conflict tumbled out in a jumbled mess. Sirens blared in the distance, a sound I had never heard in real life. My first reaction was disbelief, the kind you get when you receive unthinkable news. Then I felt a crushing sense of guilt. This can't be happening. I'd known something big was coming, but I had hoped foolishly that diplomacy would prevail. I managed to keep a steady hand on the wheel, turning toward the nearest known bunker. Ironically, it was the same facility I worked in. My mind reeled with questions. Who triggered the codes? Did they notice the missing key? Or were there duplicates all along? Within minutes, the horizon flashed in a way I can hardly describe. It wasn't just bright. It was a silent moment of pure white, as if the sun had swallowed everything. Then the rumble arrived, a deep roar that felt like it shook the entire planet. My car veered as shockwaves hit. Debris rained down. The road cracked. I pressed the accelerator, my ears ringing, wondering if I'd make it to the gate in one piece. On the radio, the emergency message repeated, "Apocalypse event detected. "Seek shelter." The sound seemed to fade in and out, overshadowed by the thunder of distant impacts. As I screeched into the facility's underground parking, armed personnel rushed around in a frenzy. The lights flickered, alarms blared. Everyone seemed to be operating on muscle memory, heading to designated safe zones. Over the chaos, I heard someone shouting about an automatic retaliatory strike. That's when I realized it wasn't just a single warhead. We had unleashed an unstoppable chain reaction of launches across the globe. The entire planet was on the brink of destruction. I barely made it into the central bunker before the main doors sealed. There was an oppressive hush as the locks engaged. We were trapped inside, a group of civilians, military personnel, and technicians, all waiting for something. Another boom rocked the structure, then another. It felt like hours of continuous quakes. When the tremors finally subsided, the overhead monitors confirmed our worst fears. Major cities worldwide were gone or heavily compromised. Communications were minimal. Some signals tried to come through, then fell silent. In those first hours, nobody confronted me about the missing key. The entire chain of command was preoccupied, trying to stay alive. I silently questioned if my impulsive theft had done anything at all to stop, or even delay this. Maybe there were additional copies, or maybe the system never needed the second key in the first place. I spent days pacing the bunker's corridors, haunted by my role in building a system that would facilitate mass devastation. People were panicking, rationing food and medical supplies. Through it all, command staff huddled in the highest security wing, whispering among themselves. Even behind titanium-reinforced doors, the reality of a nuclear apocalypse seeped into every conversation. There was talk of venturing out to assess the damage, talk of waiting for rescue. But who would rescue us? From the scattered reports, it sounded as if the entire world was in crisis. About a week into our bunker confinement, I was called to a briefing room. Waiting for me was an officer I recognized, someone I'd seen reviewing the updated vault protocols. His face was drawn, eyes dark with fatigue. He wordlessly handed me a stack of folders. "We need your expertise," he said. Inside the folders were references to leftover stockpiles, potential rogue devices, and details about the vault network. Some vaults had apparently survived the blasts with their contents intact. Others were compromised or gone completely. There were hints that the vaults didn't merely store nuclear munitions. One file mentioned experimental ordnances that could pose even greater threats if tampered with. Another contained aerial images of strange craters emitting faint radiation, areas with unusual patterns that defied conventional explanation. I looked up at the officer, my mind spinning. "What are we supposed to do about all this?" I asked. He shook his head. "We've lost communication with the upper echelons. It's just us, stuck here. But we need to keep these items from falling into the wrong hands, or from causing more destruction." The weight of the situation crushed me. Even now, after the end of the world, I was forced to be part of a plan to contain unthinkable power. "You have the highest clearance on vault system protocols," he continued. "We need you to investigate the main vault in this facility, confirm what's inside, and if anything is missing." I swallowed hard. Was that an indirect way of saying they suspected my involvement with the missing key? Or did they genuinely need my help? Either way, I had no choice. Most of the bunker was on levels 1 through 4. Level 5 was restricted to essential command, but rumor had it there was a level 6 even deeper, sealed behind biometric doors. I'd never been there. That day, I was escorted by 2 guards and the officer. We took an elevator that required 3 separate identification checks before the doors sealed and we descended. The air grew colder, tinged with a stale metallic smell. The corridor lights down there were dim, flickering. At the end of a hallway lined with reinforced doors stood the main vault entrance. It was larger than I had imagined, like the gates of some underground fortress, locked by mechanical arms and digital sensors. The officer motioned for me to proceed. Using my clearance card and a personal code, I bypassed the initial locks. The system beeped, lights turning green. With a hiss, the doors slid open. The guards tensed, and we stepped through. Inside, we found row after row of heavy containers, each labeled with coded numbers. Some were clearly marked for nuclear warheads. Others were labeled with cryptic project names I didn't recognize. A hush fell over us as we took in the sheer magnitude of what was stored there. I moved to the nearest console, preparing to run a system check that would identify what was present and what was missing. My hands trembled as I typed. The officer hovered over my shoulder, reading the lines of data as they scrolled. Warhead status, offline. Warhead status, offline. Then a new entry. Experimental ordnance, status unknown. "What's that?" asked one of the guards, his voice unsteady. "I'm not sure," I replied. "It's labeled as Project Geodesic. I've only seen references in passing." At the far end of the vault, we noticed an open container. Its lid lay discarded on the floor, and the interior was empty. The digital manifest read, "Item number G045, Project Geodesic missing." I could feel my stomach tighten. Something was gone, something possibly even more destructive than standard nuclear devices. A sense of dread washed over me. I combed through the console for any further details. A classified note popped up, part of an older archive. Project Geodesic is a next-generation device designed to harness advanced energetic reactions. Secondary function is classified. Extreme caution advised. Do not transport or activate under any circumstances unless authorized by highest level command. It was all speculation in my head, but I knew enough to guess that advanced energetic reactions meant it could be more catastrophic than even standard warheads. The officer stiffened. "We have to confirm if it's still on site," he said, though his tone hinted at the slim chance we'd find it. "If it's gone, we need to figure out who took it and where." We thoroughly searched the vault. Nothing else seemed to be missing, but I noticed a console that had been tampered with. Access logs had been erased. Someone with legitimate clearance had come in, stolen the device, and covered their tracks. We left the vault, hearts pounding. Whatever illusions we had about being safe in this bunker, surrounded by apocalypse outside, were shattered. There was a new threat, lurking somewhere in the facility's dark corridors, or maybe even out in the radioactive wasteland. Word spread quietly among the bunker's senior staff. A device was missing. Security doubled, and trust evaporated. Every day, new rumors emerged. Some speculated a rogue group inside the bunker wanted the ultimate leverage. Others guessed foreign infiltration. A few believed it was the final piece in a conspiracy that orchestrated the nuclear war from the start. I was caught in the middle, trying to reconcile my guilt about the original codes with this fresh disaster. The one thing that kept me moving was the realization that if Project Geodesic was as dangerous as the file suggested, the entire planet was still in jeopardy, even after the initial bombs had fallen. In hushed meetings, the officer and I devised a plan. We'd monitor the facility's power usage, especially in areas that had minimal foot traffic. If someone tried to activate or test the device, they'd likely need a power source, and that would create unusual spikes. Sure enough, 2 nights later, we caught a massive surge in a disused sector of Level 3, a small laboratory that was supposed to be locked down. We rushed there, me, the officer, and a handful of the few remaining guards. The corridor lights were dim, and the place smelled of burnt metal. We forced open the lab's main door, stepping into a scene that was part workshop, part chaos. In the center of the room was a strange apparatus, cables snaking out of it. It pulsed with faint blue light. Next to it stood a lone figure, barely recognizable at first, clad in makeshift protective gear. On a metal cart behind them rested a large container with the same coded markings we'd seen in the vault. My heart hammered. "Project Geodesic," I whispered. The figure whipped around. Beneath the hood was a face I recognized. One of the facility's senior scientists who had vanished around the time of the blasts. They looked haggard, eyes wide with an almost frantic intensity. We demanded they step away. The scientist ignored us, flipping switches and tapping at a control panel. The apparatus hummed to life. A bright flash lit the room, forcing us to shield our eyes. I remember the dull roar, like distant thunder, echoing through the confined space. A wave of energy pushed the guards and me back, rattling the walls and toppling shelves. Then, just as suddenly, the light extinguished. When we came to, the scientist was gone, and so was the device. In the aftermath of that confrontation, it was clear the scientist had fled deeper into the complex, or possibly beyond it. We found an exit hatch forced open, leading to the ruined surface. As soon as the bunker's command staff heard this, they organized a scouting team. I volunteered to go. It wasn't courage. I felt responsible for everything that had happened. If there was any chance to stop this last mysterious threat, I had to try. We donned protective gear, loaded up a transport vehicle designed for harsh environments, and ventured into the wasteland that used to be our country. The surface was a scene of silent devastation. Collapsed skyscrapers, blackened fields, and an ever-present haze of dust that turned the sky into a murky twilight. Radiation levels spiked in some areas, forcing us to reroute. We traveled for miles, guided by faint clues in the device's blueprint and the scientist's last known coordinates. Occasionally, we'd pick up cryptic radio signals, but they'd fade before we could decipher them. Days blurred together in the emptiness. Twisted roads led nowhere. Rusted vehicles were half buried in ash. The sense of isolation was overwhelming. We found no other human survivors, just a few scattered signs of abandoned shelters. Finally, on the brink of losing hope, we saw a glow on the horizon one night. A pulsing rhythmic light. Could it be Project Geodesic? We drove closer, hearts pounding. Through crumbled infrastructure, we spotted a structure that looked relatively intact, a heavily fortified compound that must have survived the blasts. The light emanated from within, flickering like a beacon. We moved in on foot, weapons at the ready, though none of us truly knew if we could handle whatever the scientist had done. Inside the compound, we discovered a crude setup of scientific equipment, half-collapsed labs, banks of monitors. The air was almost crackling with energy. In the largest chamber, we found the device again. It was mounted on a raised platform, cables feeding into a towering generator. The same scientists stood before it, but they looked changed, as though they had spent days in some frantic trance. The device pulsed, casting dancing shadows on the walls. I approached cautiously, heart in my throat. One of my team members shouted for the scientist to stop. No response. Drawing a deep breath, I shouted, "We can't survive another meltdown." The scientist paused, turning to face me. Their voice was a hollow whisper. Survival. That's all it ever was, right? They told me to develop new energy sources, new ways to protect what was ours. But you see how that ended. A flash of despair flickered in their eyes. Or maybe it was something else. Determination. If we can't fix what's left, maybe we can reshape it. Reshape it? My mind raced. Did they believe this technology could transform the devastated Earth? Or was it just another unstoppable threat? A final strike on a planet already battered by nuclear war? Without warning, the entire chamber began vibrating. A siren wailed, indicating a power overload. The generator behind the device glowed too brightly. Panels sparked and hissed. In a split-second decision, I rushed forward, trying to disconnect the main cable. I failed. A surge of energy threw me backward, slamming me into a console. The room spun, and for a moment, I feared the apocalypse would get its encore, right then and there. Somehow the meltdown didn't occur. The humming stabilized, and the light from the device dimmed. The scientist was gone, vanished through another passage, leaving us alone with a still active but temporarily stalled Project Geodesic. We powered down what we could, but the device itself seemed autonomous, waiting for specific inputs. I stared at its silent shell. In my pocket, I still had the key I'd taken back at the start of all this. The sense of circular fate was suffocating. We debated destroying it right then, but none of us understood exactly how. One wrong move might trigger a chain reaction. Besides, part of me wondered if the device could be turned into something beneficial. A dim hope for energy or renewal, buried under years of secrecy and fear. In the end, we did the only thing we could do. We sealed the compound behind layers of barriers. It was a hollow gesture, a temporary fix. We left a set of coded instructions on how to handle the device, just in case other survivors stumbled upon it. We never found the scientist, and we never heard any confirmation about whether they died in the wasteland or escaped to some hidden lair. Afterward, we roamed the countryside, warning any pockets of survivors we encountered about the device's existence. There weren't many survivors left to warn. Which brings me to this moment, writing it all down in the dim light of a makeshift camp. The world as we knew it has collapsed. We exist in pockets of refuge, scattered across a wounded planet. Above us, the sky is a permanent haze, testament to the nuclear war that ended civilization. There are whispers of new threats on the horizon, mutated landscapes, strange radio signals, and rumors that the stolen device might still be out there, in unknown hands. Perhaps the scientist found a way to harness it after all, or maybe someone else did. As for me, I keep the key in a hidden pocket. Maybe it's worthless now. Maybe it's the only thing standing between us and the final blow. I don't know anymore. The guilt that gnaws at my conscience remains unrelenting, but so does a faint spark of determination. If there's any chance at rebuilding, or at least preventing further ruin, I'll take it. I record this message for anyone who might read it, someday, somewhere. I want you to know the truth about how the world ended, about how we pushed ourselves to the brink and beyond. Now, standing on the edge of a broken highway under a perpetually grey sky, I'm forced to consider a question I can't answer. Is this truly the end of the world? Or can we still write a different story? I turn these thoughts over in my head as I begin the long journey to find supplies, survivors, answers. The dusty wind howls around me, carrying echoes of the life we lost, and maybe, just maybe, the faint hope of something new. I'll keep going, haunted and resolute, because I'm the ex-operative who found the keys to the nuclear vaults. And if I've learned anything, it's that a single decision can change everything. Sometimes for better, sometimes for far, far worse. Where we go from here remains unwritten. Thank you for listening. If this story sent shivers down your spine, don't forget to like and subscribe for more unsettling creepypastas. Your support keeps this channel alive. Until next time, stay vigilant and remember, curiosity can be quite the companion, and sometimes a curse.